right, guys, 6:06. We're going to go ahead and get rolling here. We've got 17 on the call, 1 in the class, and myself. Today, we are discussing attending a closing, this from the buyer side perspective, representing the buyer for the closing. We're going to talk about some stuff that pertains to the seller side. Maybe we'll do the full seller closing in a different class. We'll talk as much as we can about it today. But before I split this up into 3 sections, we're going to talk about pre-closing, the day of closing, and then post-closing, and important stuff that I make sure that I cover, and just instructional stuff to make sure that you're set up for success for your buyer's closing. As usual, I tend to ramble during these sessions. I'm going to try to throw it to you guys for some questions, some quiz questions and stuff like that. If anyone has questions, please stop me from rambling and ask your questions, whether it's in the chat. Don't feel bad about interrupting me or speaking up, or send something in the chat. I'll keep an eye on it. So you've been working with some buyers. You've been through the long process of getting them pre-approved, going out and showing them houses, making offers, going into contract on a property, getting through inspections and appraisals, getting that notification from the lender that you're clear to close. And here we are, we're coming up on the closing date. It's exciting. It should be a joyous experience for everybody. So we're going to start out talking about pre-closing, some instructions for pre-closing on, what we do leading up to the closing within within 3 or 4 days of the closing up to the closing. So the first thing I want to discuss here is the final walkthrough. As you guys know, on the last, it's either the last page or the second to the last page of our 14-page purchase contract, we specify a time period when we can bring our buyers back to the property for a final walkthrough. And the purpose of the final walkthrough is to verify that the condition of the property is that the property is in the same condition or better than it was when we first saw it at our showing and at the inspection. This typically takes place, 48 hours or less before closing. Sometimes it's right before closing, sometimes it's the day before, sometimes it's 2 days before. It all depends on your schedule and your buyer's schedule and when they can get out and see it. Things that we're doing at the final walkthrough, we're verifying the condition. We're also there to verify that if any remedies were agreed upon. So if your buyer had an inspection and some things came back bad on that inspection and you negotiated with the sellers to fix those things, we're also there to verify that those repairs have been completed. Typically, when I write my remedy request, I'll also include a little clause at the end that says any receipts or invoices pertaining to these repairs to be made available for our review at the final walkthrough. And sometimes the buyers are good about doing that, and sometimes they're not. It just depends on what kind of repair it is and if they paid for it or if they did it themselves and how that negotiation went. But if they did pay for stuff, I would love to see the invoices either emailed to me or left out on the counter when we go for the final walkthrough, just so we can see, who did the work, what it costs, the line items on that. And the third thing we're there to verify is to make sure that the sellers got everything that was agreed upon in the contract, that they got it out of the house and they left the stuff they were supposed to leave. So that's typically your appliances, your refrigerator, your stove, your dishwasher, maybe the washer and dryer, and anything else that was agreed upon to be left, and the rest of the stuff that was agreed upon to be removed. We want to make sure that they didn't leave any trash, that they didn't leave a bunch of
David.
Yes, sir. Hi, Nara.
Hi, Justin. How are you?
I'm well, sir. Did you have a question?
No, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
I was not on mute, actually. Okay,
that's okay. Great to see you. Lovely headshot
nice,
you got there.
Nice to see you.
So, we're there to verify. So an interesting situation happened to me. I had a closing in Marion, what was it, like last fall? And we showed up for the final walkthrough, and the sellers were nice enough to just dump all of the trash that they didn't want to take with them at the curb, in between the sidewalk and the street out in front of the house. So, let's say you go to this final walkthrough and you notice that something that the property's not in the same condition. Maybe some damage had taken place during the move out, or maybe one of the agreed upon remedies was not completed, or maybe the sellers have not gotten all their personal items out, or that you notice a lot of like trash, what we would consider trash and stuff like that laying around. That's the reason we do this final walkthrough. So in that situation, what I'm going to do is I'm going to immediately reach out to the listing agent and say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Listing Agent, we're here at the final walkthrough. I noticed this damage, or I noticed this remedy hasn't been completed, or I noticed the sellers have left these items. What are we doing to make sure this is done before closing? Because if not, depending on the severity of the situation, you may want to delay the closing. If a leak happened and there's water damage, you're going to want to delay that closing to make sure that gets taken care of. Either the sellers pay for it or get it repaired. Same thing with the remedies. If something's not complete, maybe it's just the fact of, hey, it's going to be done tomorrow and I'll send you pictures once it's done. It might be something as simple as that, and that's perfectly fine. And if it's personal items left there, and your buyer may or may not be adamant about having those things removed before they're willing to sign the purchase contract. So keep all that in mind. That's the purpose of the final walkthrough. And it's very important to do that because like I said earlier, I've had several situations where things were not right and we noticed it at the final walkthrough. And if you don't conduct that final walkthrough and you just go to closing and sign, you don't really have a lot of, it's tough. The recourse after you sign is tougher. There's not a lot you can do at that point. And then lawyers have to get involved. But before the closing, before they sign, you do that final walkthrough and you run into those things, you've got some leverage to get them fixed before the closing. Anybody have questions about final walkthroughs before we move on here? Or questions in general? All right, if you do, let me know. Next thing, this is pre-closing still, and we want to make sure that the buyer has reviewed and acknowledged their closing disclosure and their pre-CD. If you're not familiar with the pre-CD, it's a preliminary closing disclosure. I don't have a copy of one to pull up here. I wish I did, but I could probably dig in there, but I don't want to waste your guys' time. It's a breakdown of all the figures and costs involved, the down payments, the monthly mortgage amount, what makes up the monthly mortgage, and there's a law called TRID where it states that your buyer anybody purchasing a property has to acknowledge their pre-CD by signing it, their preliminary disclosure. They have to acknowledge it within 3 days of the closing. So they can't sign the pre-CD and then go close the next day. So you want to make sure you're communicating with your lender to make sure that they are on the ball and that pre-CD is acknowledged and signed well before the closing date. That way you're not running into it. It has to be at least 3 days prior to the closing. And also just reach out to your buyer and make sure that that they've read their closing disclosure and that they're comfortable with it. It's important for them to know all those figures, their down payment, their closing costs, their cash to close, very important, especially for the closing that's coming up. What their principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, what those amounts are, what their interest rate is, all that stuff's on the closing disclosure and the pre-CD that the lender is going to provide. So coordinate with the lender, coordinate with your buyer, make sure all that stuff's taken care of, and make sure that pre-CD is signed at least 3 days prior to the closing date before scheduling it. Sheila's raised her hand. Do you have a comment, Sheila, or a question?
I do. So the closing documents, the pre-CDs, do most lenders give those to the agent? Because I have not received any of those before.
No, it's not typical for them to share it with you. That's personal financial information between them and the buyer. But what I just like to make sure that I'm having conversation with those lenders about, hey, I'm getting ready to schedule the closing. Do we have the pre-CD acknowledged? Is all that taken care of? I like to ask that question. If your lender's good and they're on top of it, that should not be a concern. But I have had situations in the past where I scheduled a closing and then all of a sudden I find that we're really running up against the clock and that the pre-CD hasn't been signed yet. And now all of a sudden we got to reschedule and push that closing out. So Now, if your buyer's curious about something, my close relationship with my buyers, a lot of times they'll like reach out to me and the lender regarding that stuff. Now, I'll review it with them and go over the numbers as best as possible, as best of my ability. And if we run into a question that I can't answer, I will obviously say, hey, this is a conversation that the lender will be able to give you exact details on. So let's reach out to them and get them involved in the conversation. All right, so make sure your buyer's comfortable with the closing disclosure. Make sure that the pre-CD is acknowledged to make sure that we are satisfying that TRID law. Let's talk about scheduling the closing date. So in my experience, I've been the guy that tried to be the guy that does everything in the transaction, and I'm reaching out to the title company and saying, hey, okay, what dates are available? Then I'm getting back in touch with my buyer. Hey, they've got this available. Then I'm getting back in touch with the title company. Hey, what about 9 o'clock? And then I'm getting back in touch with my buyer. No, they're not available to ton. It's easiest on you guys if you just instruct the title company to reach out directly to your buyer to schedule the closing, and then stay on top of the conversation so that you can make sure it fits your schedule as well and that you can be there. And I really emphasize for us to be, it's an obvious thing to say, but it's really important for us to be at every closing. You should not miss a closing. This is one of the scary times for your buyers. They're sitting down, they're signing a stack of paperwork like that, and it's usually just a closer from the title company that's there. So you want to be there to put out fires if there's any issues, to answer questions if your buyer is not confident 100% in what they're signing, or they have a question about one of the documents. Closer is going to do a good job of explaining all that stuff, but it's important for you to be there too, to give your buyer confidence and make them feel more comfortable and relaxed. I've never missed a closing for any of my buyers, and you shouldn't either, in my opinion. Things happen. You know, if you can't make it to one, reach out to the AMP team and make sure somebody's there to help them during that process. Be there, be there on a Zoom if you absolutely have to. I mean, things happen in our lives, but it's important that you be there. So the easiest way to schedule is have the title company reach out directly to your buyer, let them coordinate, and then you figure out what time and what day that falls on in the location, and you make sure you're there. Vault Title, I can't say enough good things about Vault Title. They make scheduling for closings so easy. They'll close after hours, they'll close mobile, they'll close at your buyer's house, they'll close here at the office, they'll close at a coffee shop, they'll close early, they'll close late. They're really, really good about it, and they have great closers. We've got Carly Lear here with Vault Title. We've got Eva, and there's another gentleman, I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but the closers they use are great, and they make it really easy as far as scheduling and stuff goes. They know, I've got an investor that I work with all the time, and they just know, just reach out straight to him, and they usually do it at his office, and they make it super easy on me and my clients. So let them schedule. Don't try to do everything. Buyers, and for those of you that haven't done a ton of deals, buyers and sellers typically close separately nowadays unless specifically scheduled together. And when the two parties do sit down and close together, we refer to that as a roundtable closing. These used to be more popular when I first got my license in December of 2017 and early 2018. It was still decently common for buyers and sellers to sit down to close together at the closing table, as long as things have gone well in the transaction. If you've had an adversarial transaction where there's been a lot of tough negotiations going on, then they may not want to do that. But back then, buyers and sellers would sit down pretty regularly together to close, and that would make things a little bit easier on the title company. Not to discriminate, obviously we do not discriminate based on age or anything else, but I've noticed that a lot of my older clients, especially if they spent years and years at the property, they have this like sentiment about it, and they want to know, and they want to discuss, and they want to talk to the people that are buying their house, so they can tell them, hey, Johnny down the street, he's good for this, and here's the key, and that lock jiggles a little bit, but all you got to do is this. So sometimes older clients will want to do the roundtable closing, just makes them feel better. But after COVID, that kind of put a stop to the roundtable closings because the title companies really had to restrict who was coming in and out. And it was like really since COVID, it's gone from like 15% of them were roundtable closings to now like maybe 5% of them are roundtable closings. So it doesn't happen too often anymore. Make sure title schedules that, and you're going to be a lot easier, a lot better off for it. The next section is in regards to the buyer's cash to close. Along with that pre-CD and information from the lender, you want to make sure that your buyer is aware of their cash to close amount, which is made up from their down payment and their closing costs. You want to verify that amount with the lender, make sure that it's correct down to the penny, and they should be verifying that with the title company as well. And you also want to reach out and coordinate with the title company to make sure that the buyer understands the instructions and follows their instructions for paying that, whether it's bringing a cashier's check to the closing table, and they should know the exact amount so that they can do that, or whether it's doing a wire transfer from their bank to the title company a day or 2 days before closing. So the way that typically works is if you have a buyer who has a cash to close amount under $10,000, they'll typically accept a cashier's check for that amount from the buyer's bank. Now some title companies, not all of them, and this may not even be a thing anymore. Some title companies used to take a personal check if it was under $1,500. I don't know if that's the case anymore. So good rule of thumb is under 10,000, cashier's check's okay. More than 10,000, title company is going to require your buyer to complete a wire transfer for that amount, just because of the amount that's involved. So make sure you're coordinating with title to make sure that your buyer has their wire instructions and the exact amount, down to the penny from the lender. They can even make the check out, to be a little bit more than what their cash to close is, and the title company will reimburse them and give them the change at closing if there's any confusion about the amount. But just try to make sure they have the instructions on how to get it there and the amount of what they owe. And if your buyers are doing a wire transfer for their cash to close, make sure that they get to the bank. I would ideally have them there 24 hours before the closing if possible. That way, just to make sure that the funds make their way to the title company and that they're there waiting to be dispersed. So you're not waiting. You don't want them to go to the bank and do the wire transfer right before they're headed to the closing, because they only do wire transfers a couple times throughout the day. And, if it's not there yet, your closing could get hung up, or you might not get the keys right there at the closing if you're sitting around waiting on the wire transfer for your cash to close. I'm moving quick here. If it's too fast, stop me. If anybody's got questions, please let me know. We're going to move on. Another
Hey,
thing.
Justin, it's Dana. I just have a quick follow-up from all what you're discussing. So all of these conversations that we're having with our clients and title company and lenders, these are all part of the transaction timeline that we have within AMP, that we should be constantly in contact with our lenders, our title people. If we are down to the day or two before closing and we've not heard from title about that settlement statement, or we have not heard from the lender, there's an issue. So you need to be staying in contact every week with your lenders and everybody, just to make sure that we're on the same page. Otherwise, if you're waiting and not contacting them, suddenly there's a hang up. Shame on you, because we should be advocating for our clients and making sure things are running smooth. So just make sure you're constantly touching base with all parties involved. That's my 2 cents.
You make a great point there, Dana, and it's definitely my practice to, from the very second that we go into contract, I'm getting everybody together and making sure what needs to happen is happening. And a lot of times, if it's an email that's related to the closing, as long as there's no personal financial information being shared, I'm copying the title company on communication that I'm having with the lender and the buyer regarding the closing, or I'm copying the lender on communications I'm having with the title company and the buyer. So Dana's right. It's imperative to keep everybody in the same loop and on the same track. And this doesn't pertain to closing, but I'm going to share something with you guys. This is something I do for every one of my properties I put in contract. And this kind of goes to what Dana was just saying. Now, this is at the beginning of the process, not the end of the process, but I maintain this, let's call it a theme throughout the whole thing. So I just put a property in contract in Sunbury the other day. I'm just going to touch on this real quick, and then we're going to get back to the presentation. I put a property in contract in Sunbury the other day, and this is a email that I send out to all of the parties involved on every transaction that I do. So you'll see here the title is the in contract, and then the name, the address of the property, and then I'm copying the title company, everybody that's associated with the lender, and then I'm usually blind copying my buyers on there or sellers as well, just so that they have the all the documents involved. And it just says, hey, this is in contract. I'm representing the buyer. I wanted to get this together with all the executed documents so everybody's on the same page. Any other pertinent information, I put it in there. This is all stuff that the title company and lender need to know anyways. So I just give this to them as soon as we go into contract. And this goes to what Dana was just saying. So in contact information for everybody involved. And then I also attach the executed documents with the transaction timeline attached to them as well from Dotloop. So Dana makes a great point there. It's always a good idea, and she's right. Shame on you if you're getting up to a day or 2 days before closing and these ducks aren't in a row. It's imperative for us to stay in contact with everybody. Thank you, Dana. All right, so we've knocked out our final walkthrough. We've made sure our buyer has all the instructions as far as their cash to close and what to bring to the closing. We do the one last thing before the closing day that I want to mention is the utilities. So we want to make sure that our buyer has the information to make sure that they can get the utilities transferred into their name. And they're not waiting until like a week after or 3 or 4 days after the closing. We want to make sure that that happens on the day of closing, or if the sellers are keeping possession after closing, it's the day that the buyers take possession of the property. The reason that that's important is because the sellers are likely going to call their utility companies anyway and say, hey, I want this transferred out of my name effective as of X date. And, you know, your buyer, if they're not on top of this and they don't set these utility accounts up for the date of closing or the date of possession, they're going to go and try to move in and the electric might not be on or the water might not be on. And then they're going to be calling you, why is this not, you know, why is the electric off? Why? So it's imperative, make sure, try to do this early on. You don't even have to wait until right up until the closing. Get the utility information from the listing agent or from public record. I would reach out to the listing agent first and say, hey, who's got the electric, the water, the gas, the trash? And they may have that on the MLS or they may know that information. If not, geographically, if you know where the house is, you can figure it out yourself pretty easily. You can get in contact with other agents or myself or Mark or somebody and say, hey, who handles the electric or who handles the water up in, you know, down here in Westerville, just south of the office, there's a weird strip down here. I sold a property on Dempsey. And that whole street, I don't know how much of that area, but that whole street, Dempsey, and then some of that neighborhood there, it's Aqua America. It's not, you know, it's not the typical water company for Westerville. So you'll have little niche companies like that sometimes. If you're running into problems, reach out to the listing agent or ask around about who's got the utilities for those areas and make sure your buyer's getting those set up. That's common sense, but I'll tell you, like with all the stuff that buyers have going on, worrying about moving, worrying about cash to close and the closing, that'll slip their mind sometimes. So make sure you stay on top of that with them. All right, so we're here to the closing day. It's maybe the night before the closing day, and you're just going through your checklist in your mind of what to make sure that everybody has. This is a mixture of the title company is going to provide this information as well. They're going to give instructions to your buyers and anybody signing, but you want to make sure you know this stuff as well. So everybody that's signing must be present at the closing to present their signature, unless some sort of power of attorney has been utilized and approved by the attorney. Everybody's got to be there, and that even pertains to married couples. So we have here in Ohio, we have dower rights, which means that you know, if you own property, that your spouse also has rights to that property as well. So if you're purchasing a property and you're married, or you're selling a property and you're married, your spouse has to sign off as well, unless you've got some sort of POA or something in place that says legally that they don't have to. So everybody that's signing must be there, and everybody that's signing also must bring their ID. So they need to either have their driver's license or their passport, or the two acceptable versions of that. There may be something else that they can bring if they don't have either of those. Make sure the title company is in contact with them about that. They have to bring their disclosed cash to close amount as instructed by the title company, or they have to have had their wire transfer done already. You as the agent, something you have to bring, the earnest money deposit, if the title company is not already holding it. You know, for a long time, I didn't keep the earnest money deposit with the title company for a long time. I used to just collect it from my client and deposit it into the Red One Realty Chase non-interest bearing trust account. And then I would also be responsible for removing it from the account and bringing it to the closing myself. I did that for a long time until I realized, you know, I was putting more of a hassle on myself than I needed to. It's better to just, you know, if you've got earnest money deposit on a transaction, it's better to get it to the title company as quickly as possible. It's one less headache that you have to worry about, one less piece of money that you have to touch or that has to change hands between people. So if the earnest money is not with the title company, you need to make sure you bring it. If your buyers are taking possession at closing, you need to make sure you're coordinating with the listing agent on the transfer of the keys, the codes, the garage door openers, anything that provides access to the property. If they're taking possession at closing and the sellers aren't having possession post-closing, you need to reach out to the listing agent. I would do it on the day of the final walkthrough and say, hey, you know, as long as it's like a day or two, you know, before the closing, as long as it's not 3 or 4 days before the closing, reach out to the listing agent and say, hey, would you like me to take the key with me and bring it to the closing to give to my buyer? Sometimes they'll say yes, sometimes they'll say no. Sometimes they, you know, in most cases, they'll go and get the key and make sure that it's present, or they'll leave it in the lockbox and tell you, hey, you can, after the closing, you can go and retrieve it from the lockbox for your buyer. So make sure you're coordinating the transfer of the keys, any codes, any garage door openers, anything like that. Especially on condos, if they've got like gate codes and things like that, make sure you're coordinating with the listing agent about the transfer of those things. The last thing
somebody has playing the butt trumpet a little too loud. Chloe, it's you.
What's going on?
Do you know Poopy? Huh? Clobear?
Somebody has their speaker on. Someone mute your phones, please, everybody.
But
I think it was Elaine. Don't worry, Elaine. It's all good.
I'm so sorry,
It's
my
okay.
dog.
I didn't know who Chloe. I was like, who's
butt
Chloe?
trumping.
I'm so sorry.
You can tell Dana has been in administration. She jumped right on it.
I'm so sorry.
You're okay. That's funny.
Yes, she did.
All right.
So
the last thing here under what to bring. This is not everybody does this. You don't have to do this, but a closing gift for your buyers. I always try. This is like a special day, or I try to make it a special day for my buyers. So I always try to bring a closing gift. Now, depending on your budget and depending on the buyer, this can vary pretty widely. Not everybody does this. You know, your services and helping them achieve their goals of being a homeowner and financial, you know, freedom and all the stuff that comes along with that is gift enough in some people's minds. But for me, I always like to, I was in the hospitality industry before I got into real estate. So I always try to just make them feel special. Recently, my process for the closing gift, everybody wants to know, how much should you spend? What should you get? Yada, yada, yada. There's a ton of different options out there that you can do for closing gifts. Things I've done in the past have been customized cutting boards, like a cutting board with my logo on it. There's tons of websites, Etsy sites, places that do that. There may even be people that you know that do that as a side gig. Gift cards is a big one. That's one, you know, just a card with a gift card in it. That can really take a lot of pressure off you about what to get them. You just, you know, $50 or $25 or whatever, give them a gift card. What I've been doing recently, I set a budget for myself of about $70. I'll go to Meijer, I'll go to Walmart, I'll go to the organizational section, I'll get one of those little mini baskets, and then I'll just go around and fill it with stuff that I think they would like for about $70. I try to keep it right there. I'll put a candle in there. I'll put one of those knockoff Stanley cups. I'll put maybe a gift card inside of there. I'll put you know, maybe a screwdriver set or something, you know, just depending on the buyer. I mix it up a little bit, but I usually spend about $70 and I put it in a little basket. I put the little decorative paper in there. I dump some Hershey Kisses in there, a bag of those, and then I bring that as a gift for my buyers at closing. That's my process for a gift for buyers. So if you're into that kind of thing, that's what I do. Makes them feel special. Somebody have a comment?
Yeah, I had one backfire on me, which was an odd situation, but just kind of see how different people could take it from different perspectives. It was a younger woman bought a house, and it needed some paint done, some drywall, so just little silly stuff needed done. So I thought it was a good idea just kind of buy a $100 gift card to like Home Depot. I think it was Lowe's, actually. Lowe's, saying, hey, here, go ahead and get started on your paint, all that. The dad came in afterwards and like completely ridiculed the amount and saying it's because I felt guilty selling her the house. And then later on, the daughter and her brother came up to me later and said, hey, he's just mad because long story short, she's buying a home way before he ever did. And it was a weird situation, but he actually, like, right there in front of my face, just was like insulting me. And I was like, oh, so
Wow.
I don't know. Yeah. But, then the very next house, I bought a couple bottles of liquor for them. So, and they were just happy as clams. So I try to avoid dollar amounts, where they'll know the dollar amount.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So
I hear that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see where some people could misconstrue that or feel a certain way about it if you give them a dollar amount. That being said, it sounded like there was some weird personality stuff going on there, but most people are not going to be too
Certainly,
upset
yeah.
about getting a gift, and that's why I try to keep it kind of vague and do items mainly instead of like a certain amount of money. Money, like you said, money can be misconstrued and people can feel weird about it. So a candle, Meyer has these like candles that say welcome home on them. They're perfect for like, a home buyer gift. They also have cards that say congratulations on your new house. So I try to keep it vague with stuff like that and just a little sentiment to let them know that, hey, this is a special day. We're celebrating you. Here you go.
Hey, I have a comment again. It's
Dana.
Dana. So I typically don't bring my closing gift to closing. Typically I wait about a day or two after they have the keys. So if they get occupancy at closing, or if it's 2 weeks later, I wait until they've been in their place about 1 to 2 days, and then I stop by to say hi and bring my gift there. That way it's a little bit more personal, a little bit more intimate versus like bringing it to like the closing. So that's just something that I do. I'm not sure if that's something anybody feels more comfortable doing in that way. And that way you can just make sure too, you touch base, is everything in the house to your expectations? Do you feel good? Do you feel comfortable? Do you have questions? And that kind of allows you to step in and start saying, moving forward, this is not the end of our relationship. Now I'm here to help you as your realtor and your friend. And if you need plumbing issue, plumber or electrician, and this kind of dovetails you into like the next phase of your relationship with your client. So
absolutely. I
really like
with
that, Dana.
I agree with that. And I see the benefit of having an extra touch point beyond, immediately beyond the closing. So I think that provides a great opportunity to do that. Thank you for sharing that, Dana. Mark Hutchinson in the chat says, Linda creates stuff for our gifts, tries to do something specific for the client, depends on their personality and family likes. I've done pictures of animated pictures of the house that's framed that they can hang on the wall. I've done tons of different stuff. So there's lots of options and ideas out there. Search it and see all the different stuff you can do. Whatever is comfortable for you and you think will be comfortable for the client, I say do that. Whatever meets your budget and your process is great. I do the gifts, not everybody does. And everybody's got different processes on how they do it. And that's why I love hearing this from other agents. The good thing about Red One, we got a lot of different perspectives and methods on how we do things. All right, so we're at the closing. You walk into the title company, you say, "Hey, I'm Justin with Red One Realty. I'm here for the closing at 1072 Amherst. Buyer's name is XYZ." They're going to say, "Oh, great, you're going to be in room number 1." They're usually going to, "Hey, would you guys like coffee or water?" "Yeah, sure, that's great." Sit down. Then you're going to sit down at a conference style table, and what's going to happen is a closer from the title company is going to come in. These people are usually independent contractors that kind of bounce around and do this work for a lot of different title companies. Some title companies have specific closers that only work for them, but some of them do freelance work and will do closings for different title companies. Your closer is going to come in. They're going to have a big stack of paperwork in front of them. The first thing they're going to do is they're going to ask for the buyer's identification. Whoever's signing, they're going to take those IDs and they're going to copy them. Then they're going to come back in. They're going to hand the IDs back, and they're going to sit down and they're going to get down to the nitty gritty of starting the signing this documentation. It's 6:42, so I'm going to kind of speed this up a little bit to make sure we get through all this. Anybody has questions, still feel free to stop me. So the buyer, the closer, and the agent yourself, they sit down, conference table. We start executing the necessary docs required for the transaction. You, as an agent, you're there to bring the earnest money deposit, obviously, if you need to. You're also there to support your buyer, to answer any questions. If the closer puts a document in front of them and they're unsure about the document, or a number looks different than what they had previously seen or something like that, you're there to put out any fires that you can on site. That way, if any questions or concerns come up, you can answer the questions. You can fix issues in real time if they need to. You can have the lender on speed dial to answer a question if they need to as well. Closers, it's important. The quality of the closer can make a closing go great or go bad. Most closers, they're almost like stand-up comedians. They have like a great personality. They tell jokes. They make it more laid back and more easy for your buyer, because your buyer's nervous. This is the biggest financial transaction they're likely going to do in their lifetime. And with great closers like we have here at Vault Title, they make that process so much easier. They make it more relaxed, more laid back, more jovial. They crack jokes. A lot of them have they probably say the same thing on every closing, and it's a lot of like jokes pertaining to, hey, if you don't pay your mortgage, they're gonna come and take the house from you. And they all have like these little quirky little jokes that they make, but it really makes for the process to go smoother and for your buyer to feel better and be more relaxed. We're there to answer questions, provide the EMD, and fix issues. One thing that the title company is always going to offer during these transactions is going to be the additional title insurance policy. Per state law, they have to offer this. What it is, there was a rogue title company back in the 90s here that was operating in Central Ohio that ran off with a bunch of people's money, and those people ended up going to prison. But since then, a law went into place where title companies have to offer this additional insurance policy for the money that's being in the transaction. So they're going to ask you, hey, would you like this additional insurance? It's usually between $25 and $50. They're going to ask your buyer if they want it or not. The title company cannot instruct them on what to do, on whether or not they should utilize it or not. 99.9% of my buyers do not utilize it, and I kind of let my buyers know that. And then the title closer will usually crack a joke and say, hey, if we're going to steal your 40,000, we'll probably steal your 50 bucks too. And everybody laughs about it, and then we move on. But just be ready for that, because your buyer is going to look to you and like, oh, well, what is this? And maybe even have that conversation with them before going into the closing. Say, hey, they're going to offer you additional title insurance. You don't have to utilize it if you don't want to. Most of my buyers don't. That's the conversation I usually have with them regarding that. Buyer will take possession as agreed per the contract. So and we're going to get into the closing docs here in 1 second, but after the closing documents are executed, the title company is going to say, congratulations, you're a homeowner. And at that time, some of the time your buyer will get the keys and take possession at that moment once they're done signing. If they're waiting on funds, or if the wire from the lender hasn't come yet, maybe they're still waiting on funds, that might be delayed a little bit. Or if the sellers have possession past closing, we're going to sign today, but we're not going to take possession today, and we're going to coordinate with the listing agent about when we will take possession. So that's kind of the nitty gritty of what happens. The next section I'm going to get into is the actual documentation that they're signing. Just kind of a summary of the different things that they're signing. So does anybody have questions about what we just discussed? If so, let me know. If not, I will keep rambling. It's 6:46. Got about 14 minutes, and we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more sections to get through. So I'm going to amp it up a little bit here. No pun intended. All right, closing docs. So they're going to review the closing disclosure from their lender. Again, the title company is going to review it. They're going to ask them, have you reviewed this with your lender? Are you familiar with it? Are you comfortable with it? These are all numbers you should have seen. That's like the exact verbiage they use. These are all numbers you should have seen before, but we're going to go over it. They're going to review it with them. They're going to have them sign it. There's a promissory note involved. The buyer signs a document to promise to repay the mortgage loan according to the terms outlined, including the repayment schedule and an interest rate. The mortgage or deed of trust. This document secures the loan with the property being purchased. It outlines the terms of the loan and gives the lender the right to foreclose on the property if the buyer fails to repay the loan. They usually crack a little joke there and say, "They'll come and get you if you pay, you stay," is usually what they say. Loan estimate, the document that outlines the estimated costs associated with the mortgage loan, including the interest rate, monthly payments, closing costs, and other fees. I believe the amortization sheet is also included with that. It shows the life of the loan and the amounts that it's reduced by each time a monthly payment is made. They're also going to review, like, what their principal, interest, taxes, and insurance are. That's all going to be on their closing disclosure. And then they've got their title documents. So the buyer may sign various title-related documents, such as the deed, which transfers ownership of the property from the seller to the buyer, and any title insurance policies. So that's a quick review of everything they're signing. With a buyer's closing, it's a fat stack of papers. It's like this. They've got doubles and copies of stuff in there. They've got to make sure, all the parties involved have copies of everything. So they're double signing stuff, triple signing stuff sometimes. It takes a little while. These closings from the time you sit down at the table to the time that they're done signing is usually about 25 to 45 minutes in my experience, depending on the amount of documentation that needs to be signed. Does anybody have questions on the closing docs that are signed or required for these types of transactions? Again, just a quick summary of these. I mean, we could do a class on each of these documents, and we may at some point, but all right, so we've sat down at the table, we've signed, our buyers have signed their big stack of paperwork, and we're just kind of sitting there wrapping up. There's some things that I like to do and like the information I like to utilize during this time and point out to them. One of the big things I like to do is I like to grab the amortization sheet out of their folder. Your buyer is going to receive a copy of everything they signed, either in a folder or in a flash drive, or one of those methods. They're going to get copies of everything. I like to take the amortization sheet out and just go over it with them and discuss with them and say, hey, I like to point out that, hey, if you make one additional payment to the principal loan balance per year, you can shorten the life of the loan by up to 6 years by doing that. So whether that's like paying a 1/12 of it extra every month, or paying one lump sum of what would add up to an additional payment per year at the end of the year or the beginning of the year or in the middle of the year, that's going to help them cut down their loan, the life of their loan, and their interest on that loan exponentially. So I like to point that out to them and make them aware of that. Also, if there's any home warranty information or home insurance information present at the closing, I like to pull that out and make sure that they're familiar with the different numbers and the different processes to reach out to those entities in case they have something that happens, a leak or something breaks, and they have to utilize one of those. Mark Hutchinson says, how often does anyone experience an honest error on the Alta? That's a good question, Mark. An honest error? By the time we get the Alta, it should be balanced between the lender and the title company down to the penny. So to answer your question, the errors that I see on the Alta statement are typically commission amounts. If there was a wrong amount communicated by one of the agents, commission account amounts could be wrong. Earnest money deposit amount could be wrong. Home warranty might not be present. So there's things like that, but that more falls on us than it does the lender and the title company. I don't run into errors on the Alta too much. And I'm glad you asked that, Mark, because the title company is going to send you a preliminary copy of the Alta a day or two before the closing, and they're going to say, hey, we haven't shared this with your client yet, but you have an opportunity right now to look it over, and if you see any mistakes on here, make sure to point it out to us. Vault Title is very good about doing that. Nicole or Alicia, they're going to reach out and send you a preliminary copy of the Alta statement. That way you can review it, make sure the commissions look right, make sure that the home warranty is present if there is one, make sure that the earnest money deposit is correct, and all that. So Mark, I hope that answers your question. I haven't seen too many errors from the lender or the title company on there. It's usually stuff that us agents are responsible for that it ends up being wrong on there, unfortunately. 651, we're going to rifle through this stuff real quick. I always point out the copy of their Alta statement in case they need it when they go to do their taxes, or if they need it to set up utilities, I make sure they know where it is. When buyers close on a property, I always let them know, hey, you're going to get a ton of junk mail that looks like it's from an official department from the state or from a federal department or of some sort. 99% of that stuff is junk mail. And usually if you look at the fine print, you can see it on there. But what I tell my buyers is, hey, if you get a piece of mail that you're not sure whether it's legitimate or not, just take a screenshot of it and send it to me, and I'll let you know whether you can pitch it or if it's something you actually have to worry about. I also use this opportunity to take some pictures for my social media platforms. Not all buyers will want to do this, but most will agree to do it just to commemorate the day and have a memory of it. I'll ask them, hey, would you feel comfortable taking a picture? I'll use this on my social media, and I'll send you a copy of it too, so you can, if you want to frame it or something like that on the day you bought your home. Title companies will have cool little like keys and decorations and stuff that they can hold in the pictures. Some agents like to bring that stuff on their own as well. At this time is when I give my buyer their closing gift. Dana's got a great method of how she waits a day or two to just get that extra touch and solidify the fact that she's their agent for life going forward. So however you do that, up to you. Make sure that the title company has your brokerage wire instructions if your commission's being wired, or if you're getting a check copy of the commission, make sure you're getting it. And if you're not getting it at that moment because they're waiting on funds or XYZ, make sure you know when and where you're going to be getting that commission check, or make sure the title company has your wire instructions. Those wire instructions can be found in .loop. They're under the miscellaneous folder, I believe. So I'm here on .loop and red one, wire instructions. I know they're in here somewhere. You can find them on .loop. You may have to search through documents for them. If not, email admin.
They're actually in you're actually in your .loop. They're actually in your loop at the very bottom. If you scroll down to the bottom, it should be down there.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. They're not showing up in this one. I might have archived it or something on this one, but they're usually in this miscellaneous folder here. If you need them, you can get them, reach out to admin, look in your folder, look on the resources page. There's lots of different places where you can find those. Make sure you get a signed version of the Alta statement for your .loop folder, along with your commission check or, anything else you're getting from the company or from the title company. So that takes care of pre-closing and the closing. This last section here, I've got about 5 or 6 minutes. This is stuff that we do post-closing. The most important thing we do is we take care of our .loop. So in order for us to get paid, there's a process we have to do in .loop to make sure that happens. The AMP team is very good about detailing these processes for you. I'm going to summarize them here. If you need detailed instructions on how to make this happen, please refer to past publications that we've done or reach out to one of the leaders of AMP and we'll talk through this with you. But as far as .loop goes, we're going to submit our closing folder. And in order to do that, we need to have the following things present. We need to have the signed Alta statement signed by both parties. That should be provided to you from the title company, either immediately post closing, or maybe if it's a late end of day closing, it'll be the next morning where they send that to you. You need to have your signed commission request. And I'm just going to go ahead. This is a folder of a closing that I did in Marion. And so this is what the signed Alta looks like. It's the Alta statement that you review pre and during the closing. And then the last 2 pages will be executed by the buyer and seller. You'll see a signature there and a signature there. Your commission request. So this details what the amount is of commission that's on your Alta statement. And it also details whether or not you have any splits. If you have a team leader, if you're on a team, or you're co-oping with another agent, or it was a referral, all that stuff is going to be detailed here. You're going to let everybody know what the amounts are, and you're going to sign it. And then the last part is the commission deposit confirmation. So if the title company is wiring your commission to you, you're going to ask them for a wire confirmation along with that signed version of the Alta statement. Vault Title is excellent. Obviously, they're an in-house title company, so they've got all of our information. They do this stuff automatically. But if it's a title company you've never worked with before, you may have to reach out and request the wire confirmation from for your commission in order for us to get paid. They shouldn't give you any issue about it. They should just screenshot it or send you a PDF of the wire confirmation receipt. And if you have a physical check, when you take the physical check to the bank, you have to take a picture of the check. You have to take a picture of the stub of the check, and you have to take a picture of the deposit receipt. And all of that needs to be uploaded into your doc. So these are the three things you need: your signed Alta, your commission request form, and the commission deposit confirmation are the three things you need in order to submit your closing folder to get paid. And if you need a checklist to refer back to, there is a closing checklist in here under your closing folder that lets you know what all you need. And if you're the listing agent, there's other stuff they require from you. If you're the buyer's agent, it's just this top stuff up here. So refer to that if you need to. Possession. So we've got about 2 minutes left. I'm going to rifle through this. Possession. If the sellers have possession after closing, be sure to keep track of that timeline and coordinate with the listing agent to ensure the transfer of keys, codes, garage door openers, etc. We want to be in communication with the listing agent leading up to the day or the time that your buyer is supposed to get possession, because they may have moving truck. They may be scheduling moving trucks and all this stuff, and you want to make sure it's as easy as possible on them, and be sure that you have the stuff that's required in order for them to take possession on the proper date and time that's supposed to happen per the contract. So be in contact with the listing agent about that. Be sure at that time when you get possession, if the sellers do have possession after closing, let's say it's 7 days after the closing, and you go and get the keys from the listing agent. Again, same thing with the final walkthrough. You want to verify that that property is in the same condition it was when you first saw it. Otherwise, you're going to be reaching out to that listing agent, and there's going to be some conversation there if not. And the last part is the review. So you've had a successful closing. Everybody's got a different process on this. I like to request a review or a testimonial from my clients on their experience with me as their agent from this transaction. It's good to wait. It's not good to jump on them for a review immediately when they're moving in. That's a surefire way for them to absolutely forget about giving you one. Like Dana does with her gift, this is an opportunity for me to reach out a week later and say, hey, how's everything going with the house? Do you need a contractor for plumbing or a painter or anything like that? Also, by the way, if you could, it would be really great if you give me an open and honest review on your experience with me throughout this transaction. This helps future clients of mine know what to expect when they work with me. You can collect reviews on Zillow, on Google, on Realtor.com. Everybody does it differently. I do it personally on Zillow. And then I also upload those onto my Red One Realty website as well. And they kind of run across the screen on a ticker while people are on the website. So I use Zillow. A lot of people use Google with their Google business page. Realtor.com allows you to do this. Everybody's got a different method, but it is a good idea to collect a review. And when I ask for it, I have a template that I send to my clients, and it's called How Did I Do? So this is what I send, and this is usually a week after or so. Thank you so much for choosing me as your real estate agent. I hope you're delighted with how your transaction went. I would love your feedback about it. May I ask you the favor of writing a review about your experience with me? I want your open and honest feedback so that other potential clients who read this review will know what it's like to work with me. I'd love to have your shiny review on my business page. Here's a link to my Facebook review page. Here's a link to my Zillow request form. You'll be prompted to register your email on Zillow. It only takes a minute. It helps ensure that reviews are from actual clients. Thank you for taking the time to give me some feedback. I look forward to reading your remarks. So that's my method for collecting reviews, and I suggest everybody do that. Not everybody, even if you have a great transaction with somebody, not people don't like giving reviews for some reason. There's like a stigma with it, or they don't like to take the time, or they feel weird or awkward. They don't know what to write. So don't expect a review from everybody, but don't be afraid to ask for it too. I always make a point to ask for it. Some people are comfortable doing it, some aren't, and that it is what it is. It's not the end of the world, but it's nice to have that shiny review. So on Testimonial Tuesday, you can post that on your Facebook, and everybody can say, "Man, Dana closed this property. People were ecstatic with her. Maybe maybe next month when we list our house, we'll list it with her." So get those reviews, guys. It's 7:01. I feel like I just freestyle rap to you guys for like an hour straight. But I hope this was informative about attending a closing, especially in regards to a buyer client. If anybody wants to attend the closing with me, let me know, or Mark or any of the other leaders or anybody that, if there's somebody in the group that wants to see how this process happens in person, reach out to put it out there on the Facebook group page. Hey, anybody have a closing coming up? I'd love to come along and see how it takes place. It's pretty laid back, but you definitely want to be there, and you want to be on top of all these processes to make sure that everything goes smoothly on this big, important day for your clients. So that is my presentation for tonight, guys. It's 7:02. I'm open to sit here for a couple more minutes and answer questions if anybody has them. If not, I won't hold you here. You're free to enjoy the rest of your evening. So anybody have any closing questions or comments regarding attending a closing with their buyers?
I have a question.
Yes.
Justin, when you get the earnest money and you're giving it to the title company, does the check need to be mailed out to the title company?
Yes, sir. It does. The title company will give the title company and lender will confirm the amount based on the Alta, based on their cash to close, and it will be made out to the title company. Correct.
Thank you.
Great question. Anybody else have any closing questions or comments before we hop off? There's something in the chat here. Lisa Smith says, "Thanks so much. Great information." I thank you for attending, Lisa. I'm happy to have chatted with you. Closing's the fun part. So make it fun, be jovial, be there to support, get a gift if you want to, help them out, get their utilities set up, all that stuff. If anybody's got a closing coming up and they're nervous about it, feel free to reach out to me or any of the other leaders of the AMP program. We will get you squared away. Hope you guys are enjoying these AMP Tuesday trainings. We're going to keep this going all year long. We're going to be covering the topics based on the popularity of what people want to hear about. So keep a lookout. Thank you guys for attending these. Hopefully they're informative for you. I love you all. Have a great evening.